kind of, acknowledging out loud a little bit that, a huge part of college football in today's era is being able to rush the passer. And you're playing explosive offenses that it's not abnormal these days to see a team pass 40 times in a game. And if you're Georgia and you're getting leads on teams and you're kind of playing like you do, a lot of teams are going to have a lot of pass attempts against you. And the best way to defend the pass is to get there before it ever is in the air. So I think interesting, hire in that regard. National Signing Day was definitely a trip, right? I felt like it was kind of quiet, and then Jimbo came out and ran his mouth. I don't recall seeing like coach on coach crime like this in the league since, I don't know, maybe when Kiffin's first in at Tennessee, when he's up there on signing day telling everyone Urban Meyer is cheating and talking smack on Marlon Brown for going to Georgia and all that. I mean, I know that Freeze had his era, and I could be misremembering, but I don't remember quite as much like pointed criticism of in division coaches like this, especially when it comes to like league rules in a long time. So I don't know. We could diatribe on Fisher for a while, and we can talk about that when we get into Q&A if you guys have stuff to say. But man, like, I wouldn't have paid any attention to what a dude named Sliced Bread said about your program if you hadn't brought him up. And I mean, like, the number one rule of doing anything illegal is to never acknowledge that you're doing anything illegal. And there's plenty of schools that have been dropping bags for years. I don't think that's a secret to anyone, but you don't see, when they get accused of it on message boards or people are talking about it on Twitter, you don't see the coach get up there on signing day and try and defend themselves. And in turn, it doesn't become a story. So Jimbo Fisher, I understand he may have felt the need to defend his class, but by defending his class, he kind of put himself into a spot of, I think everyone's going to look in this a lot further and question it further than they probably would have if he had just shut up and done a press conference and talked about how excited they were for the class, given his coach's credit. And if someone asked about NIL, you just say, yeah, NIL is great. We're happy that our recruits are able to take advantage of it, or that our players are able to take advantage of it. And, I think some of the deals that some of our current guys have gotten might have helped the appeal of our university to some of these up and coming college freshmen, and you leave it at that, and you just shut up and walk away. So Jimbo Fisher needs to go to, school for guys that learn how to do illegal stuff, I guess. But I definitely thought the little clip of his press conference was interesting, where he's talking about, kind of some of the things that other coaches in the league have done recruiting wise over the years, and is telling the reporters to go look into that, because if you start pointing to where the bodies are buried around the league, that's bad business for everybody. And I'm sure that Greg Sankey didn't love seeing that. So I think that it'll be interesting to see I'm sure it'll all be behind closed doors, right? But I can guarantee you that's going to be handled over the coming months. Guys, in terms of Georgia's class and who got signed yesterday, Andrew Paul, definitely excited about his film, is impressive. His senior tape is really, really good. I think that he's one to watch. I mean, Georgia's running back room is in good hands with Milton and McIntosh and Branson Robinson, the number one running back in the class, coming in. Like, there's a lot of studs in this class, like in that room. I mean, and there's another stud in the class with them. But I think that Georgia did a good job of finding a guy with value at the I know that the NFL draft and college recruiting are vastly different, but at this point in the process, if you're Georgia, you've already brought in a lot of blue chip guys, and this kind of late signing period is about trying to identify some guys that maybe have fallen through the cracks a little bit from an evaluation standpoint, or maybe you look at their senior tape and they look like a very different player than than they did when you looked at their tape a year earlier, and kind of turning that and trying to go and bring those guys on your campus and find value of those remaining scholarship slots is really the name of the game at this point. And I thought Georgia did that in a pretty good way with Paul and Lightsley, the linebacker. So if you're a UGA fan, your class was already in a really good place. There was already a lot to be happy about. But I think you got some guys that could contribute, whether that, I'll be shocked if any of them are major players for Georgia. Any of these guys that signed late in the period are major players for Georgia. If I had to pick one that I think might be, it would be Darius Smith. Guy is built like a big long pass rusher. I mean, he's huge. He's got length. He can keep hands off of him. He can go around the outside. He's built like your prototypical, edge rushing monster that you see at the next level. So I think some potential maybe that he's able to work his way into some third down packages or something like that. But I don't expect any of these guys to be every down players right off the bat, nor should we. But I think, going back to the Uzo Dribe hire, I think that you look at the class that Georgia's brought in, the edge looks very different than it did in past years. Georgia's recruited, other than Adam Anderson, who's that lengthy, long pass rusher with the prototypical pass rush kind of frame. You've had a lot of Nolan Smiths. You've had a lot of, Malik Herring's more of like a heavy end, but Aziz, for all of his talents, the reason that you didn't see him be a really high draft pick was because he's 6'3" instead of 6'5", or 6'2", I think. So I think that if you're Georgia, you have got all these guys coming on campus whose body types fit that mold, and now you're bringing in a guy to really evaluate them, or not evaluate them, I should say, but I guess evaluate the skills they have and try and add on moves and turn them into the full package and build you an arsenal of guys that can get to the quarterback over and over and over. So definitely interested to see how this hire kind of pans out. Let's do some questions. We can talk about anything you guys want. We can talk about guys that signed yesterday. We can talk about guys that signed back in December. We can talk about any 2022 stuff. I see Scott has already put in a request to speak, so I'm going to add you in right now. I see Josh in here too. Try and get you on as a speaker as well. And yeah, Scott, you were on. Fire away if you're ready.
Hey, yeah, I definitely appreciate you putting this on. Appreciate the input. I was actually going to ask, do you see any team modeling what Georgia's attempting to do with having, the ability to pass rush off the edge instead of having those interior guys as often as we did this year?
Do I see any other teams in college football modeling that? I think that's what you were asking. Yeah, I think that most college football teams, if you look around, like, they're lucky to have one guy that can get to the quarterback, and that one guy usually is coming off of the edge. For Georgia in 2021, they just so happened to have a lot of those guys in the middle. They had Jalen Carters and Devontae Wyatts and Jordan Davises that were really disruptive. And then, especially after Adam Anderson went down, it seemed like the best pass rushers that Georgia had at the linebacker position were inside linebackers. And that's why you saw Quay Walker and Nakobe Dean playing at the edge outside linebacker spot in a lot of different junctions in the college football playoff and really the last month of the season after a lot of those guys went down. So I think that, I think Georgia's blessed in a way that a lot of teams aren't, because they're able to get those freakish guys that are big enough to eat up blocks on the inside and athletic enough to get to the quarterback and to get around guards and centers. And I mean, you see Georgia. You go back and watch tape of the season, like they're moving guys around all the time. Jalen Carter will line up at end on plenty of instances. You'll continue to see that, but like guys like Marvin Jones Jr., you know, he's a true prototypical edge. Carlton Madden, Darius Smith, some of these guys that are coming in this class, I think that Georgia has an opportunity to develop guys that are a little more of like that Von Miller or Myles Garrett type of prototypical pass rusher, that they're just so long and quick off the edge that a tackle rarely has a chance to get their hands on them. So hope that I answered your question. You were breaking up a little bit. Josh, I see you've joined us. How's it going tonight?
Good, brother. So a couple guys lined up in the YouTube chat. I think you kind of touched on Unruly Simeon, which is in our second YouTube chat, which is kind of cool. But he was asking about Andrew Paul and asking if you see any touches from him next year. And he kind of came on late, kind of came on the our recruiting sort of bulletin, our recruiting board very late. And also Emory Johnson wanted to know if there was some O-linemen that will play. What's our O-line look like to maybe take some pressure off Bennett and whatever quarterback is under center next year? So those guys, Emory Johnson and Unruly Simeon, are on the YouTube chat. So thanks for checking us out.
Yeah, guys, thanks for joining us on the YouTube chat. Josh, thanks for getting us on YouTube.
One more, and also obviously the D lineman who's gonna be the number 2 guy behind Jalen Carter. So maybe touch on a couple of those as you go through these. And I know those were 3 quick questions that are all could spend 15 minutes on, but those are the guys that are checking us out.
No, that's great. Thank you, and thank you guys for checking us out on YouTube or on here on Spaces. Trying to make this kind of a regular thing in the off season to have some fun. There really isn't an off season with college football anymore at this point. But yeah, with the Andrew Paul question, first and foremost, I mean he ran for like 800 yards last year, and then he runs for like 2,700 his senior year on over 9 yards per carry. So I think the level of competition that he was playing against is a question. He's a Texas kid, so I mean that is to his credit, but I think smaller kind of private school ball, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, you're right. Like Georgia kind of won out on the end there, despite offering him a scholarship really late in the process. I don't think that there was a ton of contact with him really until like the last month, if not even less time than that. So rare that you see a team be able to make up that type of ground with a kid like that, but UGA was able to. I think that the way that Georgia's running back room is, and kind of the way that Georgia is built as a football team, like they're going to get some big leads in some games, and especially with the rule now that you can play in 4 games and still keep a red shirt. I think you'll see him get some touches. I don't know that he's going to, like, I'd be surprised if he passed Dajun Edwards on the depth chart, or even Branson Robinson, the other true freshman that they'll have in that backfield. But I mean, it works at Georgia. You got kind of the 2 guys that are getting a lot of the touches, and then there's always sort of that third guy. I think McIntosh and Milton are probably the 2 established backs this year, and then you'll see Robinson and Edwards end up kind of fighting for that third slot, but I would expect to see both of them. And then Paul will be probably our new human victory cigar. The shout outs to Prather, or Hudson Prather Hudson. Yeah. Our guy that, you only saw him on the field if Georgia was really licking somebody in the fourth quarter. But I think you'll see Andrew Paul in some of that kind of action early, and then depending on what he does with those carries, depending on how the rest of that room shakes out in future years, I think he could definitely become a contributor, though. There's some scary good moments on his tape. Like he has some lightning quick cuts for a guy his size. So I also would not be shocked if he ends up being a big-time back for Georgia in the coming years. But first year, not so sure. Oh, gosh. I'm forgetting all the questions that were asked. Josh, help me out here. What was the second question from YouTube?
Yeah. What's our D line look like? Obviously it starts with Jalen Carter, but who are some of the guys that we expect or you expect to step up?
Yeah. So, I think first and foremost, one of the reasons that Georgia was able to recruit such a good D-line class is because there's such a high level of attrition going into next year that there's going to be opportunities to play early, right? So, I do think that Georgia is kind of in a situation where they probably are going to be relying on some guys that we haven't seen before. Jalen Carter, like you were just saying, or like the guy who was asking the question was saying, definitely he's the freak. Like, he's the first round draft pick. I'm not sure there's another one of those in this room right now, but I do think that you're going to see some of these young guys, Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, guy who, ended up being I think a 5-star on some services at the end of last year. And then, gets hurt in practice and Georgia's not really able to.
I actually did a little bit of research on this. And yeah, Ingram Dawkins is the one that's kind of like he was a high 4-star. I had him at a high 4-star according to 247. And I tried to look at what in 2020, what snaps in terms of the number of snaps that they got in 20 and jumped into 20 and 21, and it was kind of 20 was a special year, special conditions thanks to COVID, and actually Jordan Davis didn't get as many snaps, but we talked about Devonta Wyatt kind of held it down in 20, and now he's having a great Senior Bowl, and Jalen Carter is definitely has been getting looks the whole time. So Ingram Dawkins is kind of the one guy that is under the radar, and then Nazir Stackhouse. Do you think there's going to be some chances for him to secure a spot, or are we going to be seeing possibly some guys some true freshmen get in there?
Yeah, I think Stackhouse is a guy that Georgia's always going to rotate a ton of guys up front, so he's going to get some burn, but I think you're more likely to see, like Chaz Chambliss coming off the edge. I would expect to see some of that on, kind of that outside linebacker position. And then on the interior, Zion Logue, Brinson, Brinson got a good bit of run last year.
Yeah, both Logue and Brinson, Logue had 200 snaps and Brinson had 130. And decent, they were obviously, Brinson actually had a 66, defensive grade from PFF. So that's pretty good for his, for a guy that's coming up in a lot of passing downs and not playing the key downs and stuff. So maybe Brinson's a guy that joins him.
Yeah. Truthfully, I think that Mykell Williams is going to be so good that he's going to force his way into that lineup quickly and force himself to be on the field a lot, just because he's 265, but he could be 290 really quick, and I think keep a lot of that explosiveness and speed. And I think he's probably the closest thing that Georgia's going to have to another Jalen Carter in 2022. He can shoot those gaps, and he's got a pretty scary first step and can time it up. But I think that Georgia, is probably going to become more like your average college or pro football team, for that matter, in 2022, in the sense that a lot of their pressure is going to have to come from the edges or from the linebacker positions. So be interesting to shake out. But yeah, right now it kind of does feel like, Josh, you got all these guys in here, and a lot of them have gotten, some snaps, and some of them have played snaps in big moments in big games, but none of them have really stood out as being extremely disruptive. I do think that, Stackhouse and Logue and some of those guys were talking about, like another year in the program, more reps at practice, all that stuff is going to benefit them, and they could turn into studs. But I Bear Alexander, Mykell Williams, Marvin Jones Jr., I know those are all true freshmen, and I highly doubt that all of them are going to contribute, but I'd be pretty surprised if one of them wasn't, creating some havoc plays, just because that's kind of what happens when you sign 3 5-star caliber defensive linemen. We saw Trevon Walker and some of those guys in the past that were highly rated like that. Maybe not come in and play every down right off the snap, but come in and play some significant snaps and create some havoc early. And you saw flashes of it their freshman year. We got World Series champ DA Drew Aspinwall. Looks like you have a question. If any of you guys have questions, jump in here and we'll add you into the chat. Drew, you are on whenever you're ready to chat.
Hey Graham, big fan. Go Dogs, man. Not really a quick question. Just want to talk to y'all. I got a lot of Auburn buddies. They annoy the shit out of me. I find it hysterical that they say they're a basketball school now. I think that's just a cover up for how their football program's going to shit. So anyway, I just want your thoughts on that. Also, I think we're pulling off the big upset Saturday. Go Dogs.
Oh man, that would be hilarious if Tom Crean goes out his last year and just beats Alabama and Auburn, and
there's no chance.
There was no chance he was going to beat out. They were going to beat Alabama either.
There was a chance he was going to beat out Auburn. Auburn is the number 1 team in the country. They're not going to take Georgia lightly. I don't know if Alabama took them lightly, but Alabama was they've been struggling.
Everyone takes Georgia lightly these days.
Yeah. Arkansas did it to a tune of a 26-point victory last night. I would love to see it.
I've stopped watching Georgia basketball, which I'm somebody that I've watched a depressing amount of Georgia basketball over the last decade. My wife literally early this year when they were in non-conference play, I turned on a game one night and my wife was just like, "Why do you watch this? It's just going to make you depressed." And I was like, "That's a really good point." So,
but to Drew's point though, it is Barners are gonna barn, dude. It is obnoxious. Now I get it that Twitter is a very small sample size of any fan base,
right?
But it is, and I've got Auburn friends, and they're happy and proud, mostly civil about it. But it is quite obnoxious the amount of embracing of this basketball. Like they've been there the whole time, and they're like their shit doesn't stink, and it is obnoxious. And I'm going to hope that it ends poorly for them. Is all I can say about that, man.
Yeah, it probably will.
Amen,
you're the number 1 team, then your expectations are to win the national title at that point. But no, I think you look at Auburn football, it's a mess right now. My favorite stat of the offseason so far is that Brian Harsin's career at Auburn to this point, he's had 5 coordinators and 6 wins. That's something that I can't remember happening at an SEC program, even Vanderbilt, in a coach's tenure. So, he must be a nightmare to work for and work with when guys are, leaving jobs with pro teams, spending 2 or 3 weeks there, and they're seeing something that they're saying either, this isn't healthy for me on a personal level, or they're saying this is probably going to hurt my career to be part of this. So I think that, it does not look good for them in 2022. I know Zach Calzada transferred there, but a large part of why he did was Austin Davis being hired as the coordinator from Seattle, and now he's gone. So it's going to probably get worse before it gets better. I could totally see Auburn being like the USC of last year in the sense that they go into the season. We all know they're going to fire their head coach. They they go through the offseason with him anyways. They get 3 weeks into the season, and they fire him, and then the rest of the year is just like this kind of weird, lame duck effort. But, they still took Alabama to overtime. So I guess there's still some talent on that roster somewhere.
No, I mean, it's an SEC roster. They're going to sneak up and beat somebody. I mean, it's like unless the team has just completely laid down.
Totally. No, I agree with that. I mean, like, that's a school that, I don't know, even when they're bad, they always upset somebody. And, I mean, they had the 0-8 SEC year in Gene Chiswick's last season, but I don't think that it's going to be quite that bad. I mean, they've got better players on that roster than the Chiswick roster had. So I think that what's ironic about the whole Auburn basketball thing, though, is like it's proof for anybody that wants to sit there and be like, oh, Georgia, is never going to have a big basketball program or any of that. Like, Auburn's arena holds 1,200 less people than Georgia's, and they're further from Atlanta than Georgia. Like, if they can recruit those guys and create that environment, don't you think Georgia can?
Yes. Because Georgia and Auburn are absolutely recruiting the same players. There's no player that's going to choose Auburn over Georgia. Auburn doesn't bring anything. It's not like you're recruiting against North Carolina or Duke or hell, Gonzaga at this point. I mean, the same things that Auburn offers is the same things that Georgia should be able to offer. So, yeah, absolutely, Georgia can get it rolling. I don't know to what degree and where, the name, image, and likeness will certainly affect how Georgia is going to build its program, but it's ridiculous at the ineptitude of what Georgia basketball has become. And that's, unless you want me to, I could do my own spaces on this, as you guys know, but.
Well, I mean, I think with Georgia, it's like they brought in, a really good recruiting class. I think they had 5 of the top, 100 kids or something like that. Green's first full recruiting class. And then very quickly, that turns around and some of those guys are in the portal. Anthony Edwards is the number 1 overall pick, but, the rest of them are gone. And then, yeah, it's just been a disaster ever since. So it's like,
I said this on the spaces with Craig last night, and I was like, some people are on get things right. Whether it's buying Apple stock, buying Netflix, buying Amazon. The one thing in my life I'm going to be right about is I knew that Tom Crean wasn't a good fit, and all that's got me is like a 14-65 record in the SEC. So not getting rich off that. But hey, at least I was right about something in this world before anybody else was.
There you go. Maybe one day you can find out a short coaching stocks. We've got Wes Barnwell, 5-Star Sports. Looks like you have a question, so bringing you into the chat whenever you're ready.
Hey, yeah, thanks. Appreciate the time here, Graham. I was curious,
absolutely,
switching gears over to football. What do you think the likelihood of Darnell staying with the program, up until the season or through the season is at this point?
I think it's good. I think it's better than a lot of people, have maybe speculated. I mean, he's there now. He's locked in through the spring. Like he's in classes and all that. So, and he hasn't finished his degree yet. So he's not going anywhere right now. They've got spring practice to kind of sell him on the vision of how they want to use him in this offense. I think the best thing that Georgia can do to help maybe his desire to stay there is to have a strong offensive line next year, right? Like they needed him to help out in pass protection in a lot of situations last year. And I think that, you've got McClendon coming back at right tackle, which is great. Sawyer moves on, but Broderick Jones showed enough good stuff at left tackle that I think you feel good about what he can do there. SVP at center was very impressive, I think, for a redshirt freshman in his first year of really playing at all. But now it's, what do you do about that guard position? Because that was kind of the Achilles of that whole offense last year, and it kept them from being able to run the ball consistently up the middle, even against Missouri, So looking at that, I think Erickson is back. Schaefer is moved on, but I mean, I know Erickson was hurt and gimpy on that right ankle in the national title game, so I'm not trying to pick on the guy, but like look at the third and fourth quarter of that game and how different Georgia's interior running game looked from how it had looked all season with Sawyer playing right guard. It was dramatic. You saw holes there that you had not seen all year. And we had called for that switch on our show since, mid-September, I think Josh and I had. And it finally happened in, the last 3 quarters of the season. But I think that's the question, right? And you got to figure out how to keep Amarius Mims on campus. So, maybe they give him a shot at guard. It'll be really interesting to see kind of what lineup they come out with on G-Day. But I do think that's a huge kind of hinge point for the answer on Darnell. But I think the thing that a lot of people forget about Darnell is like he's a 280-pound man who had a fracture in his foot, and that's a hard injury for a big guy to recover from. So you saw him run some routes at times, but you never really saw him this season. Just even when he was running routes, on air or running routes that he wasn't targeted on, look quite as explosive and quite as quick through some of his cuts at the top of his routes. So I think part of that is him getting healthy and, them being able to flex him out a little bit and putting him out. I think that Jermaine Burton leaving maybe opens up some opportunities. Like they played him at that Z receiver position at points his freshman year. I mean, he had a pretty big catch against Kentucky and some balls against Missouri when he was lined up out wide. So I think he's a weapon and they'll find ways to use him, but it is tough if you were sitting down and you were the kid's agent and you were being honest with him, you could say, dude, if you decided to become an offensive tackle tomorrow, I can make you a top 10 overall NFL draft pick.
100%.
Yeah. So it's hard, but I do think that, they've got this window to kind of convince him that another season in Athens is the right thing. And he's such a good athlete that he's going to stick. I mean, like he's going to get a shot at the next level and all that, but I also understand, I'm sure he wants the opportunity to flash those skills and be a high round draft pick and get that guaranteed money on the rookie contract.
Yeah. I don't mean to monopolize here, but
no, you're fine.
It makes me think a little bit more about what you see or what you've seen Alabama or Clemson or Ohio State do in the past few years when they've had these third and fourth quarter commanding leads is still keep the offense open, get the ball, spread the ball to some of the playmakers, let some of these guys both get experience, but also get some of the shine that they're looking for. And we still haven't seen Kirby necessarily do that. I'm not saying Darnell would have gotten those looks because he wasn't healthy, but I'm just curious your thoughts on that. If you think that we do see that this year, or you have rationale why we might not be doing that.
It's a good point. I mean, I feel like there was a point every Saturday for a while where, I saw people tweeting about that or, kind of upset about that. And I get the rationale. I definitely think that part of that, I think that always gets put on Kirby, and that's probably not unfair entirely, but I think that some of that is on Todd Monken as well. I mean, he, during his press availability during the college football playoff was like, I don't care, like, who we're playing or whatever. It's like, I want to get out with a win, and like, I want to get out healthy. So I do think that Georgia, probably had some opportunities they didn't take advantage of to let some guys get some shine. But this whole narrative has popped up since Jermaine Burton hit the portal of like, 1,000-yard receivers and all that. And I mean, at the same time, it's like you have people that are also upset that Darnell Washington didn't get more targets this year when the leading receiver was a tight end who had 800 yards, and it's like, well, there's only so many balls to go around. Right. And I do think some of that is just like structure of the offense. It's still a run first team, but I think we probably could prognosticate that a little bit cleaner if we knew for sure right now who the offensive coordinator will be next year, because I do think there's a chance that Todd Monken moves on to the NFL, and then it could be Faulkner, it could be someone else, it could be Bobo, it could be someone from outside. I don't want to speculate on that too hard right now, but I think that Georgia, that might be something they take a look at, especially in the portal era. And I kind of started the spaces. I don't know if you were in here talking about some of the recent hires, at least to me, indicate a little bit that Kirby Smart recognizes the need to keep some of these kids happy and to maintain these relationships through that de-recruitment process, which can be really, really hard. But, you look at the two guys that left, it's like Kimber was out for basically the entire season with a shoulder surgery. Burton was never fully healthy at all this year. And then because he's hurt, Ladd McConkey has to play outside receiver against Auburn, and he, burns their number 2 DB twice on double moves for touchdowns. And then how do you take him off the field? So it's like some of this is a little bit of, if you get injured at a place like Georgia, there's enough good players on the roster that you might not get your spot back, or you might not get all of your reps back, or however you want to phrase that. But I think it'll be very fascinating to see how that all plays out, because there's going to be a lot of narratives around it, and there's going to be a lot of angst probably around it in the fan base. But it was a little humorous to me to watch everybody like melt down about that like a week after a national title.
I'm cheering for Washington. I'm a big fan of him. I just love to see the national recruits. He came out of Vegas, I believe, right? And it's like, or maybe he signed in Las Vegas out there.
No, he was out of Vegas.
He's out of Vegas, right? And it's just, I love to see Georgia become a national team like this. So I'm cheering for that for a lot of reasons. I like the kid, and he's obviously a pretty special athlete. But if Kirby can keep him, that might be his best recruiting haul of the entire offseason. And I just think that, you look at all these players coming in, but it's like, dude, the guys that are coming back are critical. And when we left the 2019 SEC championship, and we had no receivers really to speak of, and Kirby spoke to those, to have Oscar Dell coming in, an all American tight end freshman, Darnell Washington, and all these guys that are now here that are competing for playing time. That's a hell of a turnaround from where we were. Where we were just plugging in guys wherever we could, to actually having more bodies than we have balls to throw to them. So, I'm really hoping that Washington plays, but I completely understand you got to make business decisions. So,
yeah, and I think it is interesting to watch. We saw kind of some of the narratives pop up around like, well, of course Burton left because he needs to have these numbers to be a first round draft pick or whatever. And don't get me wrong, there's 100% truth to that. Like, you got to put stuff on film, and I'm not discounting that. And it's his career, right? Like, he's got a right to do whatever he wants at the end of the day. But at the same time, it's like George Pickens played in 3 games this season, and he's in the first round of everyone's mock draft right now. We saw OJ Howard basically disappear at Alabama for 2 seasons, and then pop up in the college football playoff and become a first round draft pick. So, like a guy like Darnell is such a good athlete and so kind of freakishly built that the NFL draft, Josh, you're fond of saying it's an event for outliers, and it's a very true statement. And it's also the truth that like that guy, Darnell Washington, is 100% an outlier in terms of the physical specimen that he is. There's not 6'7" dudes that weigh 280 pounds and run and cut like that walking around on planet Earth. So he's kind of a guy that I think, just because of his physical gifts, he's gonna go somewhere highly in the draft no matter what. But I think that Georgia will. You saw him get utilized a lot in the receiving game at the end of his freshman year. He some big catches against Cincinnati in that Peach Bowl, and he was kind of starting to come on, and it felt like I think he would have had a huge first game against Clemson because that defense was uniquely kind of suited to being attacked with tight ends. So I feel like it's kind of just the whole year started out unfortunately with him for that injury. And, instead of talking about whether or not he's staying right now, we might be talking about, him and Brock Bowers being the greatest tight end duo in college football history or something, along those lines. So it'll be interesting for sure.
I got an update on my Auburn Barner friends that just texted me and said Branson Robinson committed to Georgia. They just said, "Oh yeah, we're going to stay at basketball school for a while." So we're definitely rent free in some of the Barners football brains.
100%.
Real quick on these recruits that we talked about, I think this year more than ever, at least in the past couple months, I've heard Kirby talk about the character of the recruits, and he's he obviously had his through line of connection and resilience, kind of the values that he set for the team. I don't know if I've seen a better pure marketer as a head coach than Kirby. He obviously picked up some stuff from Saban, but just curious y'all's thoughts on that. I think he just handles his messaging so consistently throughout the season, throughout the years.
Yeah, I wrote an article, I think maybe a year ago, that was it was basically the premise of it is just that like Kirby Smart is a PR master, so to speak. Whenever Georgia is, gets beat on a big recruit that people are anticipating, without fail, you see some guy that's been a silent commit go ahead and announce. Like you always see him do a good job of keeping his program in the limelight and keeping positive headlines flowing and, keeping pieces of news out there so that Georgia is always on the forefront of the mind of anyone that follows college football. And that's definitely a skill, and it's something that's very intentional. And I think it kind of speaks to sort of the era that he grew up in versus some coaches that are maybe a little bit older and didn't, come of age as the internet did. But as far as this class goes, I mean, I think if you're any coach, I mean, like, you have to have talented players, right? And so not everyone gets maybe these luxuries that Kirby does. But at the end of the day, I think you have to look at the portal era and say, like, man, I'm going to recruit kids that want to be at Georgia, not just for football reasons, but for academic reasons, for family reasons, for social reasons, whatever it might be that's drawing them to that place. Because, you're going to have bad days at football practice. You're going to have times where maybe you're dinged up, or maybe there's a guy in front of you getting reps that you think you deserve. And it's all those other things that someone, loves about being at a place that helps them kind of weather those storms. And so, yeah, I mean, I think maybe that has become a bigger part of the evaluation process for UGA since the portal came into existence, because you don't want to be turning over 8 guys on your roster every offseason that you were counting on being upperclassmen and, leaders on your team or key depth or whatever. So, yeah, it's a different time though, because I mean, like, you have to recruit 100, every day of the year at this point. You're always recruiting the guys that are on your roster, plus the next crop that's coming up out of high school. So I think that if you're a guy like Kirby Smart, or, you're the Georgia program, like whether that's Trey Scott or Matt Luke or, Del McGee, making sure the guys in your room are guys that you like being around, and they're going to like being around you, and that you're going to be able to keep that relationship with is a big part of being able to kind of level up, because I mean, you look at teams in college football, it's like Alabama's able to kind of be the exception to this rule, or they have been for a while. But like with the talent that Georgia has, experience is kind of the only thing that's ever keeping them from being in contention for a playoff spot or a national title.
Hey, update. Hawks are winning by 9 at home versus Phoenix. Let's go Hawks.
Nice. Well, update on my end. Dinner is ready at the Coffey household, so I'm gonna get off. Josh, if you want to stay on, I can make you the. Or actually, no, I can't. Never mind.
Don't worry about it. We'll wrap it up, and we'll do it again ASAP.
Yeah,
that's all.
No, we're gonna do these at least a couple times a week, if not more, throughout the off season, and hope you guys will hang out with us. Appreciate all of you that jumped in here with us this evening. Thank you guys for engaging with our stuff and watching us on YouTube. Please check out the Dawg Sports Live YouTube channel and podcast feed. And I know that Josh will have these recorded spaces going up in both those places. Definitely go and give Josh a follow on Twitter if you're not already at Dawg_stats. Best analytics follow and best Tom Crean snark follow in all of the Georgia football.
Not in that order. Tom Crean's. It is definitely Tom Crean's snark season. So, I kid. We all want to see Georgia do well in every sport, and Tom Crean's low hanging fruit, and it's where we are. So let's have